I want to talk about a pretty interesting study that came out using the Moxy, and it's monitoring muscle oxygen asymmetry as a strategy to prevent injuries in footballers, soccer players for you Canadians and Americans, um, by Vasquez Bonilla and colleagues. It's interesting because this idea of muscular asymmetries can be detected with NIRS, but not with, for example, blood lactate or gas exchange information, so kind of a strength of NIRS. And that's somehow relating to, let's say, readiness, recovery status, technique. I think those are interesting, and obviously this idea, its use for detecting injury prevention, or maybe return to play, I think is really interesting. I've done a video on this before about athlete readiness. That's not necessarily to do with asymmetries, but similar things can be used. I mean, the concepts of readiness, using NIRS for readiness, would be to differentiate between right and left leg, for example, if there's a difference in readiness there. I think you can extrapolate that video to something like asymmetry and readiness. There's a few studies out there about asymmetries. There's a couple by Cooper and colleagues that look at asymmetries in speed skating, which are interesting. But in particular to this study right here, what they did was they did occlusions. So they would do rapid occlusions. They would do back-to-back occlusions, 30 seconds, I believe, and they took the average of the two as their value. And then they followed the athletes through preseason training and looked at injury prevalence. And they took a numerous different NIRS metrics that they kind of calculated. So please read the paper to get those. But in particular, they found that two of them were useful for detecting injury or was associated with injuries. So the first one is that they call it the slope 2, which is really just the minimum point of muscle oxygenation at the end of the occlusion, and the difference between that and the maximum point after the occlusion. So the maximum of the hyperemia afterwards, that's slope 2. And the other one was this muscle oxygen asymmetry, which in particular was the asymmetry between the onset of, hold on, just make sure I don't get this wrong. So the asymmetry between minimums of SMO2 at the end of the occlusion. I hope I'm saying that right. So basically, how low does it get at the end of the occlusion, and the difference, the asymmetry between the two legs of that value. And so those two, the slope 2, which I said, and this minimum difference, is what they're highlighting as relevant asymmetries. And they give you some pretty good values here to kind of use maybe in real life. So they say if the difference between that end minimum value is greater than 15%, that's associated with higher injury prevalence. So if you have a difference more than 15%, and you have a difference in the slope, in this recovery slope, of more than 9%, was considered relevant. So and this matches pretty good, I think, with generally what we've been saying, at least with Moxy. If you want relevant left-right differences, you're looking at more than 10%, which kind of goes in this more than 15%, what they're saying for injury prevalence. And so I definitely matches up with data that I was looking at as well. And so when we look at some charts here, what they show, and you see these two, there's 4 graphs here, and the top 2 are this muscle asymmetry with the min point, and the bottom 2 are the muscle asymmetry of the slope 2. And what you see is that as the muscle asymmetry gets higher in either the slope or the minimum point, injury probability goes up and up, right? So we're looking at the black line here in particular. The colored lines are just different weeks of training, and those relate to the sustained, basically the workloads they're using, the smooth load or the ACWR. But the black line, the black dotted line, is the muscle asymmetry, which is relevant for this video. So I think that's really useful. And I thought I would add maybe some data that I've collected with hockey players, the player after a knee injury. And what we did was we looked at right and left quad differences in maximum intensity bouts, or 30-second bouts, maximum intensity, and we did it on the ice, so they do sprints, or dry land. And dry land were essentially just body weight squats, so body weight additional squats, so pretty high intensity squats, and they would do those for 30 seconds. And what we see is that the green lines, the on ice, you get very symmetrical response. So especially if we take this footballer paper, in the minimum values and in this recovery slope values, they're pretty similar. You get some difference in the right and left quad on the recovery. The minimums are generally pretty similar. But what was really interesting is that if you did the whole thing on dry land, you have these pretty big right and left asymmetries, which is interesting. Maybe something to discuss. I'm going to, because I do think these things are interesting and I like discussing these, and I prefer dialogues over monologues. I've kind of decided that because I'm doing topics on the Moxy Forum, a new topic every month, I'm going to do a video on the topic so at the beginning of every month, not the beginning of May, and that's what's going to get discussed in the forum. So you can watch this video, and then if you feel like you want to discuss what I've talked about, then you can go to the Moxy Forum and we can discuss it. So I can kind of join my YouTube channel with the Moxy Forum a little bit to make it a little bit more interactive. And that'll also make sure that I at least put up one video a month. It kind of gets me going to do that because I kind of get swamped sometimes. Yeah, but thank you for listening. I think it's pretty interesting. And yeah, if you want to talk about what I presented, or if you see this differently, or you have your own examples, yeah, go to the Moxy Forum. I'll put a link in the description below. And yeah, and let's talk about some of this stuff. Thank you very much. Bye.